Guys, Hippopotamus here, and this is another build that I have put together quite some time ago, but I think it fits in really well to show it off now with the season ending, as people have made quite a lot of the Backfire builds and quite enjoyed them. So this build sort of holds on to a little bit of that damage, but also gives you hazard protection from all the hazards that you can potentially be affected by in the game. So this is quite useful as a counter in PvP, and it can also be used in PvE. So if we start off the normal way and go over to the specializations table, we'll see that we have the firewall. Now there's a few reasons for using this, and they do vary in both PvE and PvP, so let's discuss those now. So the Accelera Matrix Mesh, the armor kit, is the most overpowered thing. Really for PvP, this one, if you pop a med kit and then push an enemy while you have regen, it can really help out. As we don't have any regen on this build either, this is quite useful. Used in the right way, this can help in PvE as well, but this is mainly for PvP. The frontline recovery is quite useful in PvE. You'll see very limited mileage with it in PvP, but PvE is very good. It can help because obviously we can chain those kills on weaker enemies and gain that health back that we may, sort of have lost in the middle of a gunfight. Enriched magnesium, really burn duration is just going to be when we are using our flamethrower or when we use the fiery response, which basically is disabled in PvP. So these really gel quite well in PvE, but not so much in PvP. The shield we can use if we so wish. I would not suggest this in PvP, but in PvE this is definitely something worth that we can take. We also have the tactical link, so allies deal 10% damage to enemies that are within 10 meters of you. So in PvE, yeah, that's excellent. In PvP, I guess that could be usable as well if you had teammates. I'm not so sure how well that translates into the DZ, but I definitely know for PvE that's something that is useful. Bull Rush is useful in both, more so in PvE, obviously, because most people aren't going to let you just cover to cover like that, but when you do need to do it, that 30% bonus armor that you're going to be gaining from moving to cover is going to be quite useful, and we do take some armor cores with this build, so that 30% value is actually increased because we have a larger armor pool. We also have the cluster grenades. I think I've discussed these a few times, and the main component of these is they are better when they're used in small confined spaces, as they spread out and then sort of blow up. They can be quite useful to flush enemies out, and they can be useful to hit enemies around corners, but again, I think you're going to see a little bit of limited mileage with them because they don't really do so much damage. It's just the area of effect that is the appealing thing with them. So with the skill tree, we have the synergizing weapons, and obviously one of those is the assault rifle, and the other being the SMG that we're using. So with all that said, let's move over and have a look at the build. Sorry, I'm a bit rusty with this at the minute. I've not made build videos in a little while, and I do apologise for that. Okay, so looking at the build, the first weapon I've chosen to take, and this is my offhand weapon, or usually the weapon I start the gunfight with, is the FAMAS 2010. It's just because of its high fire rate, and it just does a lot of burst damage. So in PvP, if I start with this weapon, I don't need to charge up stacks like I do with the Backfire, so I can use this weapon if I get in a situation where I just need damage straight away, and we'll see the downside with that in just a second. So I popped 10 ranks of expertise into this. You can put as much or as little as you want in. Obviously, the more you can afford, the better this is going to work for you. Mine comes with assault rifle damage, health damage, and damage to targets out of cover. And we have the talent Streamlined, which increases weapon damage by 42% when no skills are on cooldown. This is absolutely fine, as long as we don't use a skill. Because this build is set up for PvP, generally the skills that I'm going to be using have a very short downtime and will come back reasonably quickly, which we'll see, which will help quite a bit. For the attachments, I've chosen to take critical hit chance everywhere and then just the extended magazine. So the weapon that everybody's been using and quite enjoying is the Backfire. So we can go through this one. 10 ranks of expertise. Again, the more you can put in, the better. This comes with SMD damage, crit chance, and damage to targets out of cover. So all good things. That's the way that we want it rolled. And it has the talent payment in kind. Dealing damage to enemies adds a stack of 2% critical hit damage up to 100 stacks, and it lasts for 10 seconds. So on a reload, a 10-second bleed is added to yourself, which deals 0.5 armor damage per stack. So effectively, when we reload, this is going to hurt us after we build stacks. It's not as bad as what it used to be because it's only 100 stacks where it used to be 200. But we mitigate all this damage completely with the build that we're wearing, and we'll talk a little bit about why we're doing that in just a moment. And we can just see that the attachments are fixed on there. We can't change those. So for my pistol, I say it every build near enough, it's just the TDI card. This is going to give me some extra skill tier, but it's just because of what it does here. Obviously if I hold it, it's going to give me an extra skill tier. It's also going to give me like a little bit of skill haste if I hold that extra skill tier in my hand. And it just has preservation. So if I'm in a landmark or I see a downed enemy and I'm smart enough to switch to my pistol to finish them, I can gain a little bit of armor on kill effectively. So preservation, when you kill an enemy, repairs 10% of your armor over 5 seconds, and a headshot kill will improve the repair by an additional 10%. I tend to use this like in landmarks. If I go in a landmark, I've lost a little bit of health, I can quickly switch to my pistol and save using a med kit. I have crit chance all over apart from the muzzle, which is crit damage, and we will see why these are taken optics and selections because of my stat sheet. When I get to the end, I've sort of min-maxed it for the stat sheet. Okay, so with all that said, let's move on to the gear pieces. For the main exotic that I'm using, I am using the Ninja Bike Messenger Bike backpack, and the reason for that is because I'm looking to unlock multiple brand set bonuses with the gear pieces that I am using. This always comes rolled with weapon damage, armor, and a skill tier, and I have 20 ranks of expertise into this. For the Inslot mod, I have critical hit damage, and we have the talent Resourceful. So Resourceful, effectively what it does is, when you slot it in with any other gear or brand set, it will fulfill one towards the requirements. So if you have one piece, you have two, and if you have two pieces, you have three. If you have three pieces, you have four. And it can also unlock multiple bonuses from multiple sets simultaneously. So as you'll see, we are taking multiple set bonuses, so this unlocks them all simultaneously. So onto my first piece, and I am using a piece of Cheska. This gives me critical hit chance, but with the backpack also unlocks that 20% hazard protection. We have the attributes of weapon damage, hazard protection, crit hit damage, and a crit hit chance mod placed in. Moving on to our chest piece, we have a Sokolov Concern, and this gives us SMG damage, which is very, very good because obviously we are using an SMG, and it also gives us 13% extra crit hit damage, which is great. The core attributes are 15% weapon damage, crit hit chance, crit hit damage, and a 12% crit hit damage mod slotted in. I also have Unbreakable, and this is going to give me 95% of my armor back in PvE. I believe it's round about 50 in PvP. We can check that with the stat sheet. I've been shown before that I can check that. So we'll have a look at that when we get there. But I believe it's around about 50% of your armor back, which will save your life in some gunfights. So onto my holster, and I am using a piece of Uzina Jetica. We actually have two pieces, so this is effectively going to unlock all three towards that all-important hazard protection. So this is going to give me 5% total armor, 10% armor on kill, and then the 30% hazard protection that we are looking to get. So the core attribute here is the full roll of armor, 170,000, and we have hazard protection and crit hit damage. Very similar story on the knee pads. It's pretty much identical really, and it just gives us armor, hazard protection, and crit hit damage. And as I said, that's 30% there. We also have a piece of Jarl. I know this can be a little bit difficult to get hold of because it is a DZ exclusive piece, but this is going to basically give us another 10% hazard protection. It's going to give us 10% weapon damage as well because of the two piece, which is excellent. We have armor at 170,000 rolled on, and crit hit chance and crit hit damage rolled here. We don't need another roll of hazard protection because we are at the cap at this point of 100. For my skills, I have the scanner pulse, which is going to help me spot targets, as I will be looking for, if I'm playing in PvP, I will be looking for a certain player, generally somebody that's using status effect. So if they're like a burn build, or they've got something on that's just trying to one-shot people, I'm going for that person first. So if I can understand what targets are around me, I can choose wisely and go for the person that I have the resistance towards, if I understand what the dynamics of a gunfight are actually going to be. I also have the defender drone, so the defender drone is going to help me block some incoming damage, but a word of warning, using either of these skills will take Streamline down, so effectively I need to use this weapon before I use either of these skills. So we can change these round as we please, or we can certainly change the talent on the FAMAS to something like Optimist if we wanted to hold on to this weapon. I just feel like having Streamline brings these two weapons more in line with damage of each other than just sort of leaving it as Optimist, which would be lower damage. We also have the cluster grenades, which is nothing really to write home about, but in confined spaces, they can force targets to move. So if we just go into the range, we'll check everything. So we're on Heroic, and we'll just pop in and we'll turn Skill Haste off, so we get some accurate numbers here. And then we'll just go in and we will turn off the modifiers so we don't see inaccurate numbers. So if we check the stat sheet, we'll start seeing where this all comes together. So for weapon talents, I'm using Streamline for the FAMAS to start the weapon gunfight off, because obviously if I use a skill, this talent is going to go down, but hopefully not for a long time. We have payment in kind, preservation, and we also have the flamethrower, which we can use in PvE, because we are doing sort of both. So for our weapon damages, we have moderate damage, moderate high, and we can achieve some quite good numbers just off the bat. We can achieve roughly around 357 crit hit damage when we're fully stacked up with the SMG, which is great. Okay. So for our damage again, we have quite reasonably high damages. Okay. And for our gear talents, we have Resourceful and Unbreakable, and we can toggle the stats on there, and it is indeed 50% of your armor in PvP. Remembering that we're unlocking multiple brand set pieces with the Ninja Bike backpack. For our armor, we have nearly 1.6 million, giving us some insulation and means that we're not really super squishy in gunfights. And we also have some armor on kill, which is useful in PvE, as well as some health on kill as well, which will give us some survivability in PvP as well. In PvE, excuse me. So we have no regen, which is something to be aware of. That's where the armor kit comes in. But the all-important one really is just the resistances. So we are still quite susceptible to explosives. However, when it comes to any kind of status, we cannot be affected by any kind of status whatsoever. So if the enemy player is a skill player and they're using status effect, it effectively can still hurt you, because some skills do explosive damage, but we're really going to take away the damage from the burn, bleed, or any other type of status that they try to use. So this can also be handy in things like the raids, especially Iron Horse. When you're running down for the train, you can't be stuck, and we can use this in both PvE and PvP. So for our skills, we have quite low cooldowns. They're not massive like a Reviver Hive, but just be aware that if you do equip the Reviver Hive and then maybe a shield, that these numbers are going to change and it might be different. And while we're there, it's also good just to give out a disclaimer to say if you are lower than level 1000, you might see different numbers because of the wristwatch, so just bear that in mind. Right, so I think I'll just give a quick showcase off of the damages that I'm putting out. Maybe we'll start with a boss enemy, and we can just get a quick idea. PvE. We're going to be hitting for about 389. Maybe we'll have a bit of crit. But we can see this number gets damaged quite badly the second that we pull out a skill. It's going to drop a fair old amount. Okay. So where things do shine is when you're fighting against somebody that's using riot foam, especially if they're quite tanky as well, and they're not really putting out a lot of damage. We will build up damage over time, and when enemies try to stick you, it's just not going to happen. So we can still build up quite a reasonable amount of damage here, so let's just see what we can hit, what we can achieve. Again, this number will vary in PvP, but I think if I just give a reasonable example, we can see what we're hitting at. Okay, so hitting at 635. I know that's not the same kind of numbers that Striker's been hitting at. You know, where my other Striker build that I have some hazard protection on, I'm hitting at nearly 1.5 million. But the difference between this build is that I am completely impervious to any sort of hazard that's thrown at me. And this can help me in PvP when people start pulling out, you know, sort of skill builds or riot foam to sort of surprise them and be able to take those enemies out and force them to change to a different build. So it's a little bit different. I hope that's something that you've enjoyed and hopefully something that you'll take a look at. But that's me signing out on this one. Again, I will try and put out a couple of videos here and there. I've not been as active as recent, but we'll see how things go. See you in the next one.